All right, this is assessment for energy system training for the ear rower. Now, the reason why you want to do some form of an assessment is that there's a couple of reasons as to why you want to do that. You want to see exactly what your intervention in training does to your capability over time, right? So you want to assess something, do an intervening training period, and then reassess it and just see, like, did that change? And you may also want to see just how balanced you are in certain areas. Now, I'm going to give you some things to shoot for when we discuss how to train each of gain, pain, and sustain. But this is just to basically lay out a way that you can go about assessing where you sit in each of those areas and how to do it, okay? So if you want to assess where you sit in OPEX gain, we're going to ask you to try to gain as many watts as possible in 15 seconds. So the idea here, as you can remember what gain is, what is gain? It's a release of stored energy, right? Really hard, aggressive, challenging contractions. Now, before we get to training gain, I'm sure you can recognize there, if you're asking the questions, well, should I be strong enough? Well, should I have great technique the whole time? Is it possible that I can't actually express the highest amount of wattage in 15 seconds? All of those are great questions to ask, right? Which we will explain in gain. But in the context of trying to determine if you're actually getting better at it, we have to have some test that actually expresses what gain is. What is gain? A maximal expression of stored energy, okay? If you want to think about gain in general and how you can test it, especially in energy system training, not resistance training, just think of how hard it would be for someone who's fairly good at running to maintain power output for 15 seconds if they went like all out, right? You could see how it's probably less than 8 seconds before they're going to reach their top end speed. Now, the reason why it's different here and we give people more of an opportunity for 15 seconds is that, remember, every contact time for running, remember the 8 seconds I was just discussing? Imagine how many times their feet strike the whole time they're doing it, right? 1, 2, right? What is the contraction rate for the rower? Think about that. 1 contraction. I have a limitation now because I have to go back and get ready for the next contraction. 2 contractions. So the friction, the resistance to get sped up, to create enough power so you can do a lot of really hard expressive contractions is limited for the modality that we choose. This is why we give up to 15 seconds to try to express the maximum wattage you can see. So how do you test OPEX gain? You get on the rower, presuming safety and warm-ups and mechanics and everything's perfect, right? Then when you do this, you start from a rested position and you go with the greatest form and greatest technique as hard as possible up to 15 seconds, and you record your max wattage that you've achieved. This should be easily seen on the readout. And if you can't read that, then I would recommend, like I've done before, place a tripod or your camera right next to you so you know you're not going to hit it in your stroke, and get it to focus on the screen, and then go ahead and do the max wattage so you can focus really hard on great technique and high power, and you can just see how high your wattage does get, okay? So you can see that the whole idea of the measurement is objective, right? It's an objective true measure, but it's really, it's in a confines that you may see the high wattage at 10 seconds. You may take the entire 15 seconds to get that high wattage. So we allow this opportunity for people to do it, and it's not going to be the most gross dose response. Just think of it, you're just trying to get rid of a whole bunch of energy, okay? So if you do test this, I am going to recommend you just do it one time. Repetitive pieces of it, there is some learning involved in you doing it one time. The repeated bout effect, you take a couple of minutes, you do it again, you may do it a little bit better. I just want you to try to put as much energy as possible into the brief 15 seconds. Whatever the wattage score is, I like to say, let's just get on with training. Let's do all the training, right? And then come back and reassess that over time. So if you want to see how this changes over time, just like these others, you want to do an assessment, do an intervening training period in which you're going to be improving, hopefully, skill, technique, sustainability, you're possibly doing other fitness things, and then come back after 6 to 8 weeks and reassess it. Same exact control setup, right? Same time of day, preferably the same hydration levels, food levels, sleep levels, same training wrapped around the week, and do now a retest of a controlled variable of 15 seconds max wattage. And let's see if you make any changes. And then give us some feedback based upon what you did in the training period, because that's the sweet stuff that we like to learn about to see how that was impacted. If you want to assess pain, and don't worry, we'll talk about in the training of each of these where it should go in, how often you should do it, and how you basically get set up to improve each of them. If you train pain, we're going to make it very similar, if you remember. If not, I'll refer you to OPEX Education YouTube page where you can look at where we do energy system training and assessment on the runner and energy system and training on the bike. Because both the air runner and the assault bike, we have these as being very similar also. So at least it'll allow you to tie into the similarities amongst all of them. So for pain, what we're going to ask you to do is basically culminate as much calories as measured on the metrics on the machine in 3 minutes, right? So why 3 minutes? Well, you can do a lot of things wrong in 3 minutes, but it's almost that it's so short in terms of energy work that it's uncomfortable. So the reason why we call it pain too is not because the dose response pain, is that it's really hard to develop a pace. You know, it's mentally painful. It's like, I think I'm going too hard. I'm not sure if I'm going too hard. I think this is too hard. I'm not sure if this is too hard. So you can see there's this anguish that goes on with someone in trying to maintain that power for a short period of time. Caveat, this is extremely, no, I'm going to create fear-mongering here, but I just wanted to get you excited about it. It's painful. It sucks. Like, it's hard. 3 minutes, really hard effort as much as you can. You just need to know what you're doing when you test this, okay? So for 3 minutes, and the way I'm describing it hopefully gives you that emotion that goes with this. This is really uncomfortable. But that's the whole idea. You're trying to see how much power you can perform in 3 minutes, right? So this is completely different, as you can see, than just trying to express as much energy as you can in 15 seconds. This is almost you're trying to make an unsustainable piece of work sustainable, right? So this is unsustained. 3 minutes all out. Same idea. Test, controlled environment, intervening training period, come back and retest the 3 minutes, okay? Now, how you assess sustain, same kind of idea. Theoretically, we should extend this out to like 60 minutes. Knowing full well a lot of people are not going to do that test, we make it somewhat simple for 10 minutes. So I would argue that your 10-minute score is going to give you, or I should say most people, a good reflection as to what you would sustain for 60. Just so you know, though, it's not going to give you the answer as to what you're going to get for 60. It gives you a reflection. So I'm meeting you halfway on that, okay? So what you do in 10 minutes, if you remember the power time curve, this is less powerful, right? Less powerful than this. So therefore, the dose response in the 10 minutes is more sustainable. So it's not going to mean that this won't be difficult. It's all based upon perceived exertion, but it will be more aerobic activity that we're trying to assess there. But the same idea, just to create some controls here, and that we can create controls over to your comparisons on the runner and the assault bike, but also so you can see the similarities, or sorry, the differences between maximal wattage output, right? Sub-maximal wattage output and sub-max wattage output, and see the differences in those. So hopefully you could visualize the power time curve here, right? Gain, real high power, max cals in 3 minutes, that uncomfortable middle ground, sustain testing, try to create steady state environment for as much work in 10 minutes. Same idea in mind, assess, train, reassess. Assess at the beginning of the training program, controlled environment, intervening training period, reassess afterwards. Now, a great question that was asked online that I didn't get to in the previous courses, so I'm glad it was asked, that can you do all of these on one day? And I would prefer that you didn't, only for controlled mechanisms. So if you wanted to be, let's call it perfect with this, and before I get into discussing how you do each of these, which will fundamentally answer that question, just split them apart for different days, okay? Just to give yourself a couple of days break, maybe 48 hours between tests, just to give your brain a little breather on the focus and the intention you could spend on each one of them. If I was to be really picky in order, I would go with sustain first, I would do gain second, and I would do pain third in the week. Just because if you do pain early in the week, besides scaring you and doing the other ones, it may just give you a little drop in proprioception and power output depending upon the generalized dose response of doing pain, okay? So this was called Energy System Training Assessment for the air rower. The way you're going to go about it for gain, as much effort as possible in 15 seconds and check the wattage. Pain, it's actually going to be a 3-minute countdown for total cals, right? Guns blazing for as long as you can. And then sustain, again, 10-minute countdown timer, and it's going to be a more sustainable, steady state effort for, again, the amount of calories you can complete in that period of time. And then you're on your way to putting together a training program to improve each one, and then come back and see if you've made some success on those.